Hey there, in this video, we are going to talk about the next level of your business development efforts. Now, in past videos, we've talked about our least common denominators as a company. We've talked about how to make an impression, how to engage with people, and how to make a connection. So all those skills now come into your business development efforts in a more specific way. In Business Development 101, we talked about making a strategy, what offices you're going to hit, who you're going to email, and such like that. Now it's time to step it up to Business Development 102. So in this video, we're going to look at how to keep your business development efforts effective while you're mobilizing your visual presence when you're making office visits and doing your outbound efforts. In all advertising and marketing, repetition is the biggest aspect of being most effective. Now, repetition goes back to elementary school, how we used to learn our math facts, how we used to learn everything at that age. Even today, when you hear an ad on the radio, you always hear the phone number to call repeated several times or the call to action repeated several times. There are different ways that you can create repetition in your business development efforts, and the three ways of doing that is verbal, branding, and presence. So when you're in a conversation with a prospective business development contact and you're sharing the company LCDs, don't be afraid to share the different LCDs multiple times because this creates verbal repetition. My father used to tell me if you say something loud enough and often enough, eventually people will believe you. Now, campaigning politicians, they rely on verbal repetition constantly. The next type of repetition that you can do is branding. Now, the company will provide little gifts that are branded with our phone number and our website on it, and you can leave those behind to prospective business development contacts, especially in an office setting. Now, later in this video, we will go over ways to present yourself when you first start making these visits, but when you get in there and you start getting to know people, always bring these little gifts so that way that logo is all over the office, all over everybody's desk. That creates repetition of branding because your brand is everywhere. The next way to create repetition is presence, and this has a couple of components with it. First of all, it's the amount of visits that you do throughout the year to visit your prospects. This is repeating your office visits on a regular basis, repeating your lunch meetings on a regular basis, and it's being aware of the phrase we've all heard, out of sight, out of mind. It doesn't matter how much work you do to get into those offices at the beginning. If you don't maintain them with a repetition of presence, you're going to be forgotten by that office. Now, professional full-time business developers will schedule their visits every 2 weeks. But since you have inspections to do, you have other clients to actually visit, and other things that come along with your position, for your outbound business development efforts, I would say once a month would be effective. The other component of repetition of presence is you. That's why you are the one who's always going to the office. The company isn't just sending anybody. They're not sending me or somebody else to your contacts. Those are your contacts. They want to see your face every time there's a visit to their office. A lot of TV advertising campaigns will use the same actor, so that way they're creating that repetition as well. So if you think of actor J.K. Simmons in the Farmers commercials, or Jake from State Farm, or Mayhem, or Limo Emu and Doug for Liberty Mutual. That's why it's important for you to be making your office visits to your potential contacts, because that's who they're going to get used to, and that's going to create that repetition of presence as well. When you're performing your outbound business development efforts, nonverbal communication is going to be very important, and specifically body language and what certain actions, just small little actions, will have an effect on the person you're trying to impress. If you don't have a grasp on basic body language, then you could portray that you're being aggressive or dominant or submissive or usable or dishonest without even knowing it, just because you made one small little action with your arms, your feet, even head to toe. All of it can send an unconscious message, whether it's positive or negative, to the person that you're talking to. And the rest of this video is going to go over some basic body languages, some things to do, and some things to avoid. So when you get out and start making your office visits, more than likely you're going to run into somebody at a front desk who may at first deny you access to everybody else in the office who would be considered your prime contacts. People in these positions are called gatekeepers. And it's important to know that if you have a gatekeeper denying you access to prime contacts, your business development efforts are going to start with making an impression on that gatekeeper and building their trust. A lot of what we learned in the video value perception can also be transferred over to your business development, especially when you're first meeting a prime prime contact, but especially with gatekeepers. And body language is going to be important as well. Especially with gatekeepers, your repetition of presence is going to be very important, but I do have a way to try and expedite your way past these gatekeepers and build their trust quickly. When you make the first visit and you've run into a gatekeeper and you don't get past them, usually in the front office, everybody in that office has their business card out in the front lobby somewhere. Later, sift through all those cards and determine which ones could become prime contacts for you. Then go ahead and email each one individually and say, hey, I'm sorry I missed you. I swung by the office to say hi. Hopefully the next time when I come by, I'll get a chance to meet you. Then the day before your second visit to that office, email everybody again saying, hey, I'll be stopping by tomorrow morning. Hopefully I'll get a chance to say hi. Then when you make that second visit and the gatekeeper is asking if any of these people who you're now naming specifically because you have their cards is asking if they're expecting you, you can say yes because you emailed them the day before. It doesn't always work, but it does work a lot of the times to get past that gatekeeper right there from the second visit. However, still my favorite way of getting past a gatekeeper is by making them a friend. And it might take a few more visits, but it's very effective. You build that trust and then they let you pass and then they're excited to see you the next times that you come by. After that, when you get past the gatekeeper and you're into the office visiting with prime contacts, make sure on your visits you always include them, maintain that friendship, and make them feel important because they're the ones that got you in the first place. And just like we learned in the video, The Art of the Follow-Up, make sure when you're leaving an office visit that you always set the expectation as to the next time they will hear from you or they will see you. If part of your business development plan is hitting social events and networking events, then body language is also going to be very important in making an impression on somebody in a very short amount of time. Now, in basic body language, your arms and your torso are very important. And if there's one thing that you can take away from this video, it's learning the Jesus pose. Very simply, the Jesus pose is standing square with somebody, your torso is open, your arms are open slightly, and make sure your palms are always exposed. This shows that you're non-threatening, that you're welcoming, and you're approachable. When you're talking with your hands, be aware that your hands can create what are called staples. And these are just little signals that people identify with something good or something bad. When you're making gestures, try to avoid pointing. Instead, if you need to gesture to something, gesture it with an open hand. Studies have shown that just pointing can be seen as threatening or aggressive. So again, when you're making a gesture, try and keep your palms open as much as possible. Avoid hiding your hands at all. Don't put them in your pockets. Don't shove them under your armpits. This can be seen as having something to hide. If you're holding a drink, say at a networking event, make sure, again, don't cover up your torso. Try and keep your drink out to the side. Avoid folding your arms because, again, it can be seen as challenging and aggressive. Whether you're standing, sitting, or walking, make sure overall you're keeping a good posture, your back is straight, your shoulders are natural, because if you tense up with your shoulders, it looks nervous, and if you slouch, it makes you come off as lazy. The number one tool in basic body language is your facial expressions. So you want to make sure you keep a smile, but you want to avoid a fake smile. A genuine smile is a smile you would give if a friend had just said something funny. A fake smile is a smile that you give for a photo that you're planning on posting to Instagram. Just avoid covering up your face, especially with your hands, especially around the mouth area, because even police investigators are trained to spot these things to see if someone's being dishonest. And that's the kind of unconscious message it sends. Avoid rubbing your neck, overly scratching your face, or playing with your hair, because all of these, again, fall into the dishonesty category. Also, keep your eyebrows relaxed. I know it sounds stupid, but talking with your eyebrows down or talking with your eyebrows up can send different messages as well. This is aggressive and this is vulnerable. The other reason to stand squarely when talking to someone is if you stand off to the side, it makes you look to the side and now you come off as sketchy. Believe it or not, your legs and your feet can also send negative messages to the person you're trying to talk to. So if you're sitting or if you're standing, make sure that your legs are open and parallel and do not cross them, especially if you're a man. Studies have shown that people see men who cross their legs as unapproachable for some reason. However, this was not an issue for women, so don't worry about that. However, your feet are also important. Make sure your feet remain firmly planted because tapping your toes or shaking your feet a lot can also come off as you being nervous. Now, once you're starting to build a relationship with these people and your body language has been very sound and has made an impression on people, then you can take it to the next level, which is called mirroring. With mirroring, you are taking the gestures that the other person are doing and you're doing them yourself occasionally. Even if the other person is doing something that basic body language says you shouldn't, it's okay to do them briefly, like folding your arms, keeping your hands on your hips, those types of things. But it's important to know the difference between mirroring and mimicking. Mirroring is occasionally matching their gestures, so that way they get an unconscious feeling that they can relate to you or you to them. Mimicking is where you're copying every movement the other person is doing, and usually they notice pretty quick, and it usually ends up insulting them. Mirroring can take some practice if you're not used to it, so make sure you get with your sales coach because they'll be happy to go through different sessions where you're practicing the difference between mirroring and mimicking. The last skill set that you want to work on in your business development efforts that are outbound is your verbal impressions. And by this, I don't mean your verbal inflections. Your verbal impressions are basically little things you can do in conversation that will make people want to partner up with you. First off, make sure you speak respectfully. And by this, I mean, usually when you're doing your outbound business development, you're getting in front of people who are busy at that moment and have a very small amount of time to devote to you. Even in a social event or a networking event, those people are looking to make connections with other people as well. So there are just small windows of making an impression with each other and seeing if you're a good fit for a partnership. So speak with the understanding and be respectful that the other person doesn't have a lot of time to give to you. Next up is be amusing. You don't have to be some stiff who is all business all the time. Again, you're trying to make friends. That's not how you're going to make friends. So you want to make sure you're amusing, tell a joke or two if you have one, laugh at their jokes. If you can find moments where the two of you are laughing together, then they are definitely going to want to partner up with you because people want to work with people who make them laugh. And lastly, have anecdotes. Tell little stories about yourself. Just make sure you do it in a relatable moment. So if something comes up in conversation, or you see a photo on their desk, or in their cubicle, or something else on their desk that inspires a good story, go ahead and tell it. If you notice, people who are friends usually communicate to each other by telling each other their stories, whether it's a story about their history or a story about their day. So again, in your business development efforts, sharing anecdotes helps people see you as a potential friend, and that's the ultimate goal. And if they are relatable anecdotes, you are now creating a connection with that person. As always, practice your nonverbal communication skills, your basic body language do's and don'ts, and your verbal impressions because your confidence is really going to make the difference towards your success. And if you need help developing those skills, don't be afraid to ask your sales coach. That's what they're there for.